Friday. I am Bree Zabreski, co-founder and CEO of Apollo Performance Wear, and this is the show where we talk about the issues that are impacting the dance world, from racism to dance medicine and science to gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and more. We're chatting today with our dear friend Ashley Mowrey about values and why they're important and how to set them for yourself and your students. This is something that the lines get a little bit blurred, so I'm excited to be able to chat with Ashley today. My friend and fabulous co-host Melissa McDaniel is out today, so it is me flying solo with my friend Ashley. And for those of you that don't know Ashley, she has been a longtime visitor and guest on the show. She's a former competitive dancer, dance educator, competition company director. Now as a mindset coach, she is helping dancers build a healthy mindset so they can shine on and off the stage. Ashley works with dancers one-on-one through virtual coaching, as well as studio and team workshops. She holds a BA in psychology from the University of Arkansas, is an associate certified coach through the International Coaching Federation, a whole person certified coach and trauma-informed certified coach, a certified positive psychology coach, and a trained facilitator in Tara Moore's Playing Big coaching program. Ashley is a specialist for Doctors for Dancers, a blog contributor for Apollo Performance. And you can also see her on tour with Embodied Dance Conference, where she leads mindset skills seminars for all ages, including parents and teachers. Ashley, welcome back, friend. How are you?
Thank you so much, Bree. I'm doing well. How about you?
Oh, good. We're always so excited to have you back on the show. We just love all the ways that you are helping to just bring awareness to mindset skills in the dance community. So it's always fun to have you back to have these conversations. I feel like I always learn so much every time you're on. So I'm
Oh,
excited to dive
good.
into this.
Yeah, I love being here. Thanks again. This is my third time this season, which has been really fun to do three. So I'm really happy
No.
to be here with you
Kind of
all.
did our guest series this year, and it's been a lot of fun to kind of dive deeper into the mindset portion of performance arts, because it's such a big one. I feel like it's something that we're seeing a bigger spotlight on mindset and positivity and that growth mindset that we like to talk about on the show. So it's fun to see it kind of taking shape in the dance world. Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I love doing this work with you all and Doctors for Dancers and Embody. Like I just love that, more and more dancers are getting these resources that like I so desperately needed as a teenager and as
Yes.
a young dance educator. So I love that it's becoming more and more popular and getting, this education out there. So I
Yeah.
appreciate you all having me a lot.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous. Like, I wish we would have had all this growing up, but we wouldn't be able to have the perspective that we have. So there's good and bad. But
Yeah.
I want to dive in and talk about the difference between values and ethics, because
Mhm.
I think they're used interchangeably and they are different, right?
Yeah, yeah, they are. They are different. So, ethics are more about morality, right and wrong. So, when we think about ethics, it's more about what's right versus what's wrong. We can think of ethics as like a code of conduct or best practices.
Okay.
And then values are principles and beliefs that are important to us.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about it in just a very basic term of competition. So
Yeah.
the ethics of competition would be how you conduct yourself as a competitor, how you act when you win or lose, how you treat others, where values would be what?
Where you're placing the importance, like
Got it.
where what you believe to be an important aspect of that competition. So, like, also with ethics, right? So, right or wrong. So, are you going to, as a competitor, like, how are you going to treat the other competitors? And also, like, is your studio lying about stuff? Like, are
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
playing fair? The right and wrong of those morality things. And then, whereas values would be more of like, um, I believe that me going out there and presenting my most authentic self and my best performance is what I find important about this experience, and I'm going to focus on that.
Got it. Okay, that helps.
Yeah.
So can you explain the importance of setting values for yourself, especially as an educator or director of youth performance athletes? Because I think oftentimes we are so busy thinking about how to craft things and programs and standards for them, but we forget it starts at the top and we have to start with us, right? So what's the importance of that?
Yeah, as educators, when I think of values, I think that it brings both clarity and self awareness to our behaviors and our decisions. So, when we have our values set, we have a clear picture of what is important to us, our beliefs that we hold sacred, and therefore,
Yeah.
then we can use those values to help us make decisions. What does our program look like? What are my teaching methods? And it can bring that self awareness about, are my behaviors currently in alignment with my values that I hold to be important?
Yeah, and so the benefits are really just more clarity and talk about the benefits
Yeah.
because you're getting clarity, but you're also, I mean, I would think that it really trickles down to the students too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the benefits are definitely the clarity, the self awareness, and then also decision making. As an educator and a program director or whatever your role is, I know there are so many decisions to be made. And I know myself as like a young dance educator in my early 20s, anytime I had decisions, I was not rooted in my values, and I was really being swayed by like other people's opinions or comparison to other studios or, oh, well, they're doing that. Maybe we
Sure.
should do that. And so it can really help you make decisions from a place that feels most authentic to you.
So how does that work though in the setting? And I'm going off on a tangent already, but how does that work on a setting when it's we've talked about this hierarchical in terms of like there's the teacher, student, the teacher setting the program, but we're also encouraging students to set their own
Yeah.
values. And what if that doesn't match with the ones of the director or the studio that they're attending, or you find that they're not aligning in some ways? How do we navigate that?
Yeah. I think it's really nuanced. And I think that a couple things come to mind when I think about how values can impact a studio and then also what to do when they're not in alignment. Number one, I think it's totally okay that we all have our different values. And I think it's really important that we respect and honor each other's values and we can have conversations about them. I also think that is important when we are working with a team. So, like, let's say a competition team, for example. I think it's really important to get to know your students' values and see what they are, see what is important to them, see what they place value
Yeah.
in. And then also, I always recommend that teams set like maybe three values as a team together that are their team values
Okay.
that they can all agree on. So, taking your students through a process of looking at all these different values, having a voting system of some sort to be able to come up with a top three team values that everybody believes in and everybody can buy in on, and really using those to unite and to work forward towards whatever goals you set in place.
Yeah, thank you. That is helpful, and I was gonna say it might be good to treat it as its own entity, its own living, breathing thing,
Yeah.
and you're setting these values for you as a team as well. I think that's such a brilliant way to kind of get everybody on the same page.
Mhm.
Um, if you are just joining, I am Bree with Apala. I'm chatting today with Ashley Mowrey. This is Beyond the Steps. We're talking about why it's important to set values for yourself and your students as you're working with young performance athletes and the benefits of doing that. If you're just joining us, make sure you go back to the beginning of this conversation as well as like, share, and subscribe. We really want to get the word out about this show and about all of the incredible information that we're getting from our guest experts every week. And you can too. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And as we're going and having this conversation, we want to hear what you think. Drop your comments in the chat or the comment box, and we would be happy to hear from you. We always love hearing from different perspectives from the people that watch the show and even fuse that into future episodes. So thank you for watching. And we're going to move on to segment two. So, Ashley, what are some of the consequences or issues you see when people, teams or studios don't have a clear value system? What are the detriments to that?
Yeah. So as I spoke to, I really experienced this in my early 20s as a young educator. I kind of sort of knew what I didn't want, like what I didn't believe in, but I didn't
Yeah.
really have a clear picture of what I did want. And because of that, I would just be so swayed by other people's opinions or what the studio down the street was doing. And I would get really caught up in that like competitive comparison
Yeah.
mindset. Whereas, like, that's not actually what I care about. I care about the health and excellence of my kids, and I don't really care about the competitive nature of this sport. And so, because of that, I got stuck in a lot of that. I think also too, when we don't have set values, whether that's personal or as a team, I think we can get caught up in comparison, in gossip,
For sure. Yeah.
right? Like, what are we valuing as a team? What are we talking about? How are we acting? Are our behaviors in alignment with what we find important? If we don't know what's important, how are they aligning with that? Um, and then I think we can also really get hooked on feedback from others when we don't have a clear picture of what our own values are. Okay. So, like, if we go to a competition where, and yes, I always think that like judges' feedback is so important, even if it might not be in alignment with your values. But
Yeah.
it can help us understand and get perspective when we can see, like, oh, I wonder if they value something different than what we're bringing, and that's okay. Like, we can still
Yeah.
listen to their feedback, but it can help us get perspective and not be so attached to that praise and that feedback.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So, how do you, a lot of times when you're talking about values and ethics, it borders that judginess. We want to avoid the judginess, right?
Yeah.
Because it always makes people feel uncomfortable. So, how do you communicate clear core values to your team or organization without feeling like you're the morality police or that you're imposing on someone else's right to show up authentically or, their freedom to be themselves? Do you feel like having a buy-in from everybody involved is important?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I do think that a buy in is important. And I think a really great way to do
I
that
agree. Yeah.
is to set team values, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Really hearing your dancers' perspectives and really understanding what is important to them, and then all coming to a decision about team values. And then I think it also goes about like it I think it's how you go about it, right? Like, I
Yeah.
would say, check our own judgments, check our own self, and we're not going to go around and say, you're wrong, that's wrong, because all of our values aren't wrong. Like, they're what we hold to
Yeah.
be true and what we believe in. And so, going from that stance of like, I can hold these values and it's okay for me to hold these values while they hold those values. And, if somebody isn't super aligned, like if they're like drastically different, I think often that works itself out. Like, when I think about studios, when I think about my students or parents that we had like drastically different, like they wanted the 24/7 competitive environment. I wasn't
Right.
that person for them, and that's okay, and that's totally okay. And their values might align with somebody else, and it can kind of let us let go of situations that aren't serving us in order to like stay in alignment with our values. And we're not going to do that in a judgy, harmful way. We're going to say like, it's okay that we don't see eye to eye on this, and I want you to
Yeah.
find what's best for you.
I will say it's really important, especially I think this is my opinion and my experience,
Yeah.
but working with kids, understanding who you are and where you're coming from, your perspective, your value system, if you will, is so important to clearly articulate from the get-go before everybody commits, because I do
Yes.
agree with you. I think that there are some people that are going, that was always my thing. I know exactly who we are, exactly where we're going, and I also know that that is not for
Yep.
everybody. So I was really vigilant about making sure to set those expectations up front,
Yep.
let them know what they were getting into, and also taking the responsibility throughout the season to make sure that I honored that and was that. So if I
Yes.
said it, it happened.
Yep.
If I said it, I did it. And I stood by all of that throughout the year and was very consistent. But when you don't do those things, you run the risk of really upsetting people because they bought into something that they didn't,
Yep.
they got into something that they didn't agree to.
Yes.
That's not what they thought they were getting. And so setting those clear expectations up front and understanding that in your own mind before you start the season is I think really important to give them the choice to go somewhere
Yeah.
else. And you have to be okay with that too. Like if they go somewhere else, I'm good
Yep.
because I know where I'm
Yes.
going, right?
Yes. Yeah, I love that. And that you're so right, Brie. I think that that's such a great perspective of like sharing and communicating those things up front, right? Like, that's why I always love like a meeting of some sort where these are
Yes.
communicated,
Yeah.
or a audition packet, where students and parents can really see what are the values of this program that we're about to sign up for.
Yeah.
Are they in alignment with what we want? And then those decisions can be made. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and also I also think checking in a couple times, maybe at the beginning of before the season and then middle of the
Yeah,
season. I always did like a 2 meeting. It was the beginning or before and then middle because values can change,
yeah,
and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but it's also in the interest and the spirit of consistency. They don't, you can obviously change whatever you want, but it's important to hold off on those big changes until the new
yeah,
season to stay consistent with what you told and promised everybody at the beginning of the
yes.
season. So checking in, taking that pulse, getting the feedback, what's working, what's not working, and implementing those things for the new season ahead,
Mhm.
but sticking with what was promised and what was delivered
Yeah.
throughout the current season.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah. I love that. And I love what you're saying too about, yeah, checking in and seeing what's working, what's not working. And then if we need to reevaluate for the next season, we can. And, our lived experiences inform our values, and so,
Yeah.
whatever is working or not working, or whatever we find with this group of dancers to be the most important, then we can make adjustments for next season. But I love that getting feedback and checking in and communicating about them halfway through.
Yeah, and from parents, kids, and staff. I
Yes.
think that they have completely different perspectives. Sometimes I was always fascinated by the feedback that I would get about what's working, what's not. Sometimes it was eerily like similar, and sometimes it was completely like one person thought it was great and the other person thought it needed work. And
Yep.
you find a way to meet in the middle. But it is interesting when you hear that feedback. So I definitely encourage people to do that. It is very helpful.
Yeah.
Um, but so we talked a little bit before about how you handle value systems and when they don't match, but how do you handle when an individual's behavior, whether that be a student, a teacher, or a parent, doesn't align with the team values? Do they get dismissed? Do you work through it? Is there that no cross boundary line, that when they cross that, that's it, it's done? I have an answer for that, but I want to know what you say and what the real
Yeah. Yeah.
recommendation is.
I think it's nuanced, and I think most of the time it's like a case by case basis. I think we all
Okay.
probably have that line somewhere. And I think it's
Yeah.
important to communicate that line, where that line is. But I think also, if we're being honest, there's probably a lot of little yellow, orange flags along the way before we
Sure. Oh,
get to that
100%.
line. And so what I always encourage studio owners and educators to do is address things as soon as they come up. Have these conversations. I think most of the time you can work through them. I think,
Sure.
as humans, we are imperfect, we are flawed, we are going to make mistakes. I think it's so crucial for kids to know that and to have the experiences as kids and young adults of how to navigate. I made this mistake. I did this behavior that is not in alignment with the studio, and I'm going to be held accountable, but through that process, I'm going to feel loved and feel cared for, and I think that's so important to be able to work through those things. So, as long as the other person is open to working through it and having conversations, taking accountability, and then taking action to correct the behaviors, I think that most things can be worked through. And again, if you're addressing those little yellow, orange flags as they happen, hopefully we don't get to the big line crossing. And then if that does
Yeah.
happen, I think, that's another conversation. And I think that that's when you can say, like, hey, this isn't working out. We had X, Y, and
Yeah.
Z happen, and the behavior continues. And this is where I think we're going to have to part ways.
Yeah, it's really tough because so much of this affects the students, and it's not always their choice.
Mhm.
I remember one year I had a parent that there had been issues along the way, and had lots of conversations and addressed things as they come up. And one, it was competition. Obviously, when everyone is stressed out and acts at like max capacity, a parent just totally lost it on one of our teachers at competition
Yeah.
publicly, like screamed. It was a big thing.
Yep.
It was a whole ordeal. And teacher was very upset. The kids were upset and didn't address it there, but ended up asking them to leave the
Yep.
studio. because it was just my value system was I support my teachers.
Yes.
I have their back, and in a public setting, like there was a way to deal with that,
Yep.
and it was like the last straw.
Yeah.
So it was really hard because the kid was devastated, but it was a choice of what aligned with the value system, and what that value system was set at the beginning. I
Yep.
had the grounds to then be able to say, this was very clear.
Yep.
You went against that, and I'm sorry, but we need to part ways. And it was very, very difficult, because obviously first competition of the season, you want that kid to be able to finish it out, right? And we couldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And those are such hard decisions. And I've experienced similar things too. And it's so hard. But I do also think that what a beautiful representation of like holding to your values that shows people,
Yeah.
even if they can't see it in those moments, maybe like even years later, having that perspective of like, oh, I remember when my teacher, Miss Bree, really stood up for her values
Sure.
and lived into those, and that was a really great example of that. So hopefully.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
yeah, I think as a studio director and an educator, it's very hard to stick to those things because you fall in love with the kids that
Yes.
you're working with and the
Yeah.
families that you work with, and it is very difficult to stay the course.
Mhm.
And it's a good reminder out there to do it, because it really does then send a message to everybody else that, yes, we have these values, and yes, we really are serious about them. And, we ask everybody to honor them, or there will be consequences for that.
Yep. Yep.
It does set a tone.
Yeah.
It definitely sets a tone.
Yeah, absolutely.
My husband's walking through the background painting our house because we're moving right now. So forgive
I
that.
love it.
No, we're recording, honey. We're recording. um, but anyway, so yeah, I think it's a good reminder. So when obviously you had mentioned earlier, we fall short as human beings sometimes, right? How do you suggest confronting yourself and taking accountability for yourself when your own behavior conflicts your value system?
Yeah. Yeah, it can be really hard, those moments where you have that self-awareness and you have that moment of like, "Oh, I messed up. That behavior was not who I want to be, was not in alignment with my values." Self-criticism will not help. I know often
Right.
our go-to is that like, "Oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm such a bad person," whatever. That's not what we need in those moments. We actually really need self-compassion. And as we
Yeah.
talked about before, self-compassion is not giving ourselves a free pass. It's not saying like, "Oh, I'm going to be nice to myself and I don't have to address this." No. Self-compassion just means treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we would treat a friend. And so in those moments where we mess up, we can acknowledge it and say, "Oof, yikes, that was bad. Not proud of that. What would I say to a best friend right now if they were going through that?"
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
from that place, what steps do I need to take to either repair harm, take accountability, correct my behavior? But you really have to meet yourself with that kindness and understanding first.
Yeah, giving grace to yourself is always hard. You want to beat yourself up after the fact, and you just have to kind of give grace and recognize it and move on, and not repeat it, right?
Yeah.
That's the challenge. So I do agree with you, but it is easier said than done for sure.
Yeah.
Can or should values inform your curriculum or class content as an educator? So, for example, being a highly competitive studio versus being a rec studio, or the type of music you use, or the costumes you wear, and on and on and on. What is your
Yeah.
thought?
Absolutely. Yeah, we are going to be our most authentic educators and creators when we are in alignment with our values.
Yeah.
That is a way that we put our belief system into action through our values. And so I think absolutely your values should inform how you teach, what you teach, where you teach, all of those things. And that is going to be most authentic, but also like when you are your most authentic, you're going to attract those people that are also like in alignment with those things. And so I think that it can really help create that magical space, for your program and for your team, whatever it is.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. So we like to do a thing on the show that we give homework, and you know this. Every week we like
Yes.
to issue a homework assignment that everybody out there watching can do between now and the episode next week to kind of see progress and make change. In this case, in regards to identifying their value system. So, what is one piece of homework what is your homework challenge for our watchers, our listeners?
Yeah. So my homework challenge is to set your own core values and get really clear about those. And I have a previous blog post that I did for Apollo Performance where I talk about values and talk about the importance of values and how to use them. And then I walk you through a whole coaching exercise that you can do both for yourself and for your team if you want. And again, if you do it with a team, I would really make sure you get everybody's input and do some type of voting system. But you can find that. Bree just linked it. And I challenge everybody to read the whole blog and do the exercise in the next week to set your values. What a great way to go into your summer of dance or summer of whatever you're going into with your values really clear as a guide for your summer.
And if you're a teacher and educator out there, it's not too late to re-examine what your value system is for your programs and your studio. And we're still, it's not too late to identify what those things are for the new season that we have coming up.
Absolutely.
So think about that, put some time into it. It's worth it. And I think you'll see a difference in the way your year plays out with your students and with yourself, your own sanity. So we also like to give homework here on the show, and ours is the same every week. We want to offer you the opportunity to take our Beyond the Steps course. It was the founding premise for the show. It is a free online course, 5 modules that tackle topics from racism, gender inequity, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and dance medicine and science. And each module was curated by experts in their field. You can take it absolutely free by clicking the link here. It's also on the Apollo website, but we encourage you to do that. You can go at your own pace. Have your staff take it, have your team of, your whole team take it. And it is by no means everything you need to know, but it is a great jumping off point, a great foundation to kind of build on your education, because when we know better, we do better. So check that out. And you can also find it on apolloperformance.com. Ashley, I know that we love to connect people with you anytime we can. So how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, my website is ashleymowrey.com. My Instagram is at ashley.mowrey.mindset. And my email is ashley@ashleymowrey.com. So people can reach out whether they're interested in one-on-one virtual coaching. I do that with dancers and dance educators, or team and studio workshops. I do both virtual and in person. Values is a popular one that I do. So if you want somebody to come in and do this for your team, we can talk about that. Just reach out and I'd be happy to chat about it.
Yeah, and as you know, we've talked a lot. We're starting to wrap up season 3, and we've talked a lot this season about, sourcing out some of the things. Like, you don't have to be an expert in everything. I know sometimes it feels like that. It can be
Yep.
very isolating. It can feel like a huge weight of responsibility to be, nutritionist, psychologist, counselor, parent, friend, sibling, whatever, a physical therapist, whatever,
Yep.
right? We have a lot of hats as dance educators that we wear. This is something that you don't have to try to figure out on your own. Ashley is an expert in this, and she does it really, really well, and is very well versed in how to approach this and customize it to your value system at your studio
Yep.
for your program and your students. So I really encourage you at least reach out and get the information from Ashley. I think it will make a huge difference in your year, not only with the way that you are approaching your students, but also in the way they're feeling about themselves, which in this time, post pandemic, I think just mindset overall for our students is one of the top priorities, and we're finding it needs some work, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So thank you, Ash, for being here. As always, we're so
Mhm.
grateful to have you every time you come back, and we look forward to welcoming you back in season 4 as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bree. And thank you everyone for joining today.
I love it. It's been another fantastic conversation. Thank you all for watching. Shout out to Melissa McDaniel Grisham, who is not here today, but will be back with me soon. In the meantime, make sure you go and like, share, subscribe, follow Apollo Performance, follow Turning Point Dance Creations. Make sure you join our community. We want to get the word out there about these episodes. We are turning this into a podcast later this summer, so stay tuned for that. And we are already hard at work on season 4. So if you have a topic that you want to see covered in season 4, or a guest expert, or you're a guest expert that wants to join us, message us. We want to hear from you. info@apolloperformance.com. You have your homework from Ashley. You have your homework from us. So it's going to keep you busy. And until next week, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Everybody have a wonderful weekend.